the millionaire who lost his heart to the hotel heiress in disguise. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. Daniel Steele was the kind of man who believed that everything in life could be controlled, even love. At 33, he owned one of the most luxurious hotel chains on the East Coast, built from ambition, sleepless nights, and a heart that had long stopped believing in miracles. After his fiancée betrayed him years ago, Daniel buried his emotions beneath contracts and numbers. He no longer believed in promises. He only believed in signatures. But life, as always, had its own way of tearing down walls. When his older sister, Anna Steele, became gravely ill, Daniel took in her 7-year-old son, Ethan. The boy's laughter filled the marble halls of the hotel, softening a man who had forgotten what family sounded like. Every morning before school, Ethan would run through the lobby, waving to the staff, proudly telling everyone, "That is my Uncle Daniel." For the first time in years, Daniel smiled without forcing himself to. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. While playing near the rooftop pool, Ethan slipped on the wet tiles. Before Daniel could reach him, a young woman dove into the water without hesitation. Her name was Emily Grace, a quiet, capable manager in the housekeeping department. Known for solving problems no one else noticed. She pulled Ethan out of the water and held him as if he were her own. That single moment carved her into their lives like destiny, had signed a silent contract. Ethan followed Emily everywhere after that. He waited for her during lunch breaks, drew pictures of her, and told his uncle, "She makes the hotel feel like home." Daniel observed from afar, curious about the woman who could win his nephew's heart so effortlessly. There was something about her, a kindness that felt out of place in a world of business and betrayal. Then tragedy struck. Anna Steele passed away after months of battling her illness. The news hit Daniel harder than any corporate loss ever could. He became the sole guardian of Ethan, but the world outside showed no mercy. Within days, tabloids splashed headlines across every platform. Millionaire uses sister's death for sympathy marketing. A gossip blogger released leaked documents claiming Daniel had transferred his sister's assets to hide corporate taxes. A major financial newspaper questioned his mental stability, suggesting that a man with emotional imbalance could not raise a child. Investors panicked. The stock value of Steele Hospitality dropped 18% in 2 days. Reporters flooded the hotel lobby, shouting accusations, while cameras flashed like lightning through the glass doors. Ethan, too young to understand, asked his uncle why people were angry. Daniel had no answer. For the first time, he realized power could not protect what truly mattered. He spent sleepless nights in his office overlooking the city, replaying his sister's last words. "Promise me, Daniel, do not let him grow up alone." But the custody board began to question whether a single man, surrounded by scandal, could offer a stable home. Daniel's lawyer told him bluntly, "A family court wants to see a household, not an empire." And so, Daniel Steele did something he had never done before. He made a decision with his heart, not his logic. He needed a wife, someone kind, presentable, trusted by the hotel staff, and good with Ethan. A temporary marriage, a legal solution, a contract that could calm the storm. When his gaze fell upon Emily Grace, he saw the answer. She was steady under pressure, graceful with people, and most importantly, Ethan adored her. Daniel approached her one evening in the quiet garden behind the hotel. The sunset brushed her face with amber light as he said, "Miss Grace, I need your help, but what I am about to ask will sound insane." Emily hesitated. "What kind of help?" He took a breath. "A marriage, a contract marriage. 3 months. Enough to protect Ethan and keep the company from collapsing. I will handle everything financially and legally. You will not lose anything." Silence. Only the sound of distant traffic and the wind through the trees. Emily looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "This is not how love should start, Mr. Steele." Daniel's voice softened. "I am not asking for love. I am asking for a chance to keep a child safe." And that was the beginning. A contract written on paper but destined to rewrite both their hearts. The wedding took place on a quiet Friday afternoon. inside the private ballroom of the Steele Grand Hotel. The ceremony was small, elegant, and carefully staged for the cameras. Reporters were invited, photographers filled the corners, and the headline the next morning read, "The Millionaire's Secret Wedding, a New Chapter of Love." But behind every flash of light and every forced smile, there was an unspoken truth. This marriage was a contract, a temporary alliance built not from love, but from necessity. Daniel Steele stood beside Emily Grace during the ceremony, his posture composed, his eyes unreadable. Yet when their hands brushed for the first time, something unexpected stirred inside him, something warm, something real, something that frightened him more than any financial loss ever could. After the vows, Daniel looked at her and said quietly, "From this moment on, you are my wife in the eyes of the world. You can stop anytime you want." Emily answered softly, "No, I gave my word, Mr. Steele. I would do this right." Within days, the media storm began to fade. Pictures of the elegant couple filled social media. Investors regained confidence. The hotel's stock began to rise again. On the surface, Daniel Steele was a man who had turned tragedy into triumph. But inside the glass walls of his penthouse, life felt nothing like the headlines. Their new home was large and cold, a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, all glass and steel, a symbol of success but not of warmth. Daniel worked late every night. Emily learned the schedule of the household staff, took care of Ethan, and quietly filled the silence with small acts of kindness, flowers on the dining table, a bedtime story before Ethan fell asleep, a soft goodnight left unsaid to Daniel through the closed office door. At first, Daniel tried to keep his distance. He told himself that this was a transaction, a performance for the world to see. But every time he saw Emily with Ethan laughing, caring, kneeling beside the boy with a tenderness that no contract could describe, something inside him began to shift. One evening, Ethan knocked on Daniel's office door, holding a crayon drawing. "Uncle Daniel, this is our family," he said. The picture showed three figures holding hands, Daniel, Emily, and Ethan, with the words, "My home," written in shaky letters. Daniel stared at the paper for a long time after Ethan ran off to play. It was the first time he realized that even a fake marriage could start to feel real to a child. That night at dinner, Emily finally spoke what had been sitting in her heart. "You do not have to act all the time, Daniel. The boy does not need a perfect father. He just needs someone who looks at him and stays." Her voice was calm, but the truth in it hit him harder than any boardroom argument ever had. For a moment, Daniel could not answer. He simply looked at her, this woman who had walked into his chaos and somehow made it quieter. Days turned into weeks. Their routine became strangely natural. Emily handled the hotel charity events, earning respect from the staff. Daniel began to ask for her opinion in meetings, something he had never done with anyone before. At night, they sat at opposite ends of the living room, sharing silent company, she with her book, he with his laptop. It should have felt awkward. It did not. One evening, a storm rolled over the city. The thunder rattled the windows, and Ethan crawled into their room, frightened. He nestled between them on the bed, whispering, "I do not like the thunder." Emily held him close, and Daniel found himself reaching out, wrapping an arm around both of them. For the first time, he felt something he had not known in years, peace. When the storm passed, Emily gently laid Ethan back in his room. Daniel followed her to the hallway. The air was still, the light soft. He said quietly, "You are good with him, better than I ever could be." Emily turned to him. "You are wrong, Daniel. He looks at you like you are his hero. You just do not see it yet." Their eyes met. The distance between them felt fragile, like glass about to break, not from anger, but from something deeper trying to escape. Before either could say more, Daniel's phone rang. It was his assistant, his voice sharp and panicked. "Sir, we have a problem. Someone is investigating your marriage. They say your wife's identity is not what it appears to be." Daniel froze, the words cutting through the quiet like lightning. Outside the window, the storm began again. Inside, the perfect lie they had built was about to be tested. The morning after the storm, the world outside the penthouse was calm again, but Daniel Steele's thoughts were anything but. The words from his assistant still echoed in his mind. Someone was investigating Emily Grace. He spent the night staring at her file, her resume, the spotless record she had submitted when she joined the hotel. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. Yet when Emily appeared at breakfast, wearing her simple cream blouse and offering a gentle smile to Ethan, Daniel could not bring himself to confront her. He watched her pour orange juice for the boy, listened to the laughter filling the room, and thought, if she is hiding something, why does this feel so real? Days passed, and the investigation seemed to fade into silence. No article appeared. No reporter followed them. Daniel wanted to believe it was over, but the question never truly left his mind. Still, something else began to take its place, a warmth he could not explain. Emily had started working on a failing resort property owned by the Still Group, a mountain retreat that had been losing money for years. She proposed a new idea, opening the resort to veterans and families in need, turning the loss into a charitable division that could rebuild the brand's reputation. At first, Daniel rejected the idea. This is business, not charity, he said, but Emily's calm voice replied, sometimes the best business decision is to remember you are human. Against his usual instincts, he agreed to let her try. Within weeks, photos of veterans and families enjoying the newly renovated lodge went viral online. The story of the Steel Group giving back became a public sensation. Investors praised Daniel for his vision, unaware that the true idea came from the woman he had once considered just a contract. One evening, Daniel visited the mountain resort quietly. He saw Emily speaking to the staff, thanking them one by one, encouraging the smallest gestures of kindness. She looked radiant not because of beauty or glamour, but because of purpose. As he watched her from the hallway, one of the employees whispered, she treats us like people, not positions. We will follow her anywhere. Those words stayed with him the entire drive back. For the first time, Daniel felt something dangerous admiration. Back at home, Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for them. Emily gently covered the boy with a blanket. Daniel stood at the door, watching the two people who had unknowingly changed the rhythm of his life. Later that night, he found Emily on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. She turned slightly when she heard him. Could not sleep? She asked softly. He shook his head. I have been thinking about what you said, about business, about people. Maybe I have been wrong for a long time. Emily smiled faintly. You are not wrong, Daniel. You are just protecting yourself. We all do, in our own way. The silence that followed was gentle. The hum of the city below, the cool night air, and the sound of their breathing made the moment feel almost fragile. Daniel finally spoke. Do you ever regret signing that contract? Emily looked up at him. Sometimes, she said honestly, but not because of what people think. It is because I do not know which part of this is still pretend. Her words hit him like a quiet confession. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Daniel said, maybe it does not matter. Maybe the pretending stopped somewhere, and we just did not notice. A faint smile crossed her lips, but before she could reply, the balcony door opened. Ethan stood there rubbing his eyes. Uncle Daniel, he mumbled, I had a bad dream. Daniel knelt beside him, guiding the boy into his arms. It is all right, buddy. You are safe. Emily watched the scene quietly, her eyes softening. The man who once lived behind walls of ambition was now holding a child with the gentleness of a father. When Ethan fell back asleep, Daniel carried him to his room. As he tucked him in, he felt Emily's presence behind him. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. He loves you, you know. Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but vulnerable. And you? He asked, barely above a whisper. Emily met his gaze, then turned away, hiding the answer behind silence. In that moment, Daniel realized something he could not put into words. The woman he had married for appearances was becoming the only truth left in his carefully built world. But just as hope began to take root, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number appeared. Do you really know who your wife is? The warmth in his chest turned cold. He looked at Emily standing by the doorway, her face half in shadow. For the first time since their wedding, he wondered if the life he was building, this fragile happiness, was built on another lie. The message appeared on Daniel Steele's phone like a blade through calm water. Do you really know who your wife is? It came from an unknown number. No name, no context. Just those words, sharp, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. For hours that night, Daniel sat alone in his study. The rain tapped against the windows as he scrolled through every article, every file, every digital footprint tied to Emily Grace. He could not find anything wrong, yet his instincts told him something was off. He had built empires on reading people, and for the first time he was afraid he had read someone completely wrong. When morning came, Emily prepared breakfast as if nothing had changed. Ethan ran into the room with his toy airplane, filling the penthouse with laughter. Daniel watched them both from across the table, his mind racing with doubts. Every smile she gave him now carried a shadow. Later that day, during a meeting at the hotel, one of his longtime associates, Richard Hale, handed him a folder. "You should see this," Richard said quietly. Inside were photographs Emily leaving a private dinner with a man Daniel recognized instantly. Victor Grace, the powerful CEO of their rival hotel chain, and the very man who had spent years trying to destroy Steel Hospitality Group. Daniel's heart stopped. "Where did you get these?" he demanded. Richard replied, "They were sent anonymously to several investors. You need to control the story before the press does." End of 4. That evening, Daniel confronted Emily the moment she walked through the door. "Who is Victor Grace to you?" he asked, his voice low but trembling. Emily froze, the color draining from her face. "Daniel, please let me explain." He stepped closer, holding up the photographs. "You lied to me. You lied to the world. You used me to protect your father's company, did you not?" Tears filled her eyes, but she stood her ground. "He is my father, yes, but I am not working for him. I left that world behind to prove myself, to show I could build something on my own." Daniel's voice rose. "You could have told me the truth from the beginning." Emily shook her head. "And you would have trusted me? You hate that family. You would have never hired me, let alone married me. I had to earn my place before I could tell you who I really was." For a long moment, there was silence. Only the sound of Ethan's footsteps in the hallway. The boy looked at them, confused. "Are you fighting?" he whispered. Emily wiped her tears quickly and knelt down. "No, sweetheart. Grown-ups just talk loudly sometimes." She hugged him tightly, her shoulders trembling as Daniel turned away. That night, Emily packed her suitcase in silence. Daniel stood at the window, staring at the city lights below. "You used my family's pain to fix your own reputation," he said coldly. "I do not care about your excuses. This marriage is over." Emily stopped in the doorway, clutching her bag. "You are right, Daniel. I should have told you. But what we built was real, at least to me." He did not turn around. "It was never real. It was a contract. Do not make it something it was not." Her voice broke as she whispered, "Maybe you are right. Maybe love cannot survive in a world built on contracts." When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed was unbearable. Ethan woke up to find her gone the next morning. He searched every room before finally running to Daniel's office, his eyes red. "Where is she?" he cried. "You said she was family." Daniel could not answer. He simply knelt beside the boy and pulled him into his arms. "I am sorry, Ethan. She is not coming back." But deep inside, Daniel knew he was lying not to the boy, but to himself. Over the next few days, the story broke wide open. The media called it the Heiress scandal. Headlines screamed, "Fake marriage or corporate espionage." Stockholders panicked once again. The same reporters who had once called Daniel a hero now branded him a fool. Meanwhile, Emily disappeared from the public eye. She resigned from the hotel quietly and left the city, refusing to defend herself. The woman who had once healed his home now became the ghost he could not stop thinking about. At night, Daniel sat in Ethan's room, watching the boy draw pictures of 3 people holding hands, one of them still labeled Emily. One evening, Ethan looked up at him and said, "If she made us happy, why can she not come back?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Sometimes people make mistakes that are hard to fix." The boy nodded softly and whispered, "Then maybe we should help her fix them." Daniel said nothing, but those words haunted him long after the lights went out. For the first time since Emily left, he realized the boy was right. She had broken his trust, but she had also rebuilt everything else: his heart, his purpose, his family. And as he stared at the quiet city outside, one truth became clear. No matter how hard he tried to erase her, the woman he had once called his wife was still the only person who made his world feel alive. The days after Emily left were colder than any winter Daniel Steele had ever known. The penthouse, once filled with the sound of laughter and footsteps, became a hollow space that echoed with silence. Even Ethan's toys stayed untouched, stacked neatly in a corner like forgotten memories. Every morning, Daniel went to work earlier than before, hoping long hours could drown the noise in his mind. But the truth followed him everywhere, in the quiet hum of the elevator, in the scent of Emily's perfume still lingering in the guest room, and in the way Ethan looked at him without speaking. He had built his life on order and control, but now everything felt out of place. The boy had stopped asking about her, but Daniel could see it the way Ethan stared at the empty chair at breakfast, waiting, hoping. One night, Daniel walked past the garden terrace and found Ethan sitting there, holding a small stuffed bear. "She told me this bear would watch over me when I was sad," Ethan said softly, "but I think it misses her too." Daniel sat beside him and took a deep breath. Sometimes people leave not because they want to, but because they think it is better for everyone else. Ethan looked up. "Do you think she will come back?" Daniel wanted to tell him yes. Instead, he whispered, "I do not know." "Oh, well?" When Ethan went to bed, Daniel stayed in the garden long after midnight. The air was cold. He looked up at the night sky and thought about Emily, where she might be, what she might be thinking, and whether she hated him as much as he hated himself for letting her go. The next morning, his assistant handed him a newspaper. The headline read, "Heiress of Grace Hotels Disappears Rumors of Charity Work Abroad." There was a single photo of Emily surrounded by children, smiling in a small village far from the city. For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. She looked happy, but not free. There was a sadness behind her smile that he recognized instantly. At work, the boardroom felt emptier than usual. His executives discussed numbers and recovery plans, but Daniel's mind drifted. Every time someone mentioned the word grace, it hit him like a wound reopening. That evening, after another long day of meetings, he returned home to find Ethan asleep on the couch. The television played an old cartoon. A drawing rested beside the boy, another family sketch, this time with a line connecting all three of them and one word beneath it, together. Daniel sat down quietly and studied the picture. His throat burned. He realized that he could not keep living in the silence he had created. The boy deserved better. So did the woman he had pushed away. For the next few weeks, Daniel began visiting the orphanage Emily had once donated to in the city. He asked questions, made donations, and tried to understand what she had been trying to build before everything fell apart. The volunteers remembered her well. One woman told him, she never talked about herself, but she talked about a man who had forgotten how to love. She said she hoped he would remember one day. Those words stayed with him like a song he could not turn off. Back home, Daniel found himself standing in the guest room that had once belonged to Emily. He opened the drawer of her nightstand and found a folded piece of paper, a letter left behind. His hands shook as he opened it. The handwriting was hers. "Daniel, if you ever find this, I want you to know that I did not lie about everything. I came into your world because I had something to prove, but I stayed because you and Ethan reminded me what home felt like. You said our marriage was just a contract, but for me it became a promise I could never sign away. Please take care of him. And if one day you decide to forgive me, I will still be somewhere out there waiting, not as an heiress, not as a wife, but as the woman who truly loved you." By the time Daniel finished reading, his vision blurred. He sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the letter against his chest. For the first time since she left, he allowed himself to cry. The following morning, Ethan woke to find his uncle sitting at the table with 2 packed bags. "Are we going somewhere?" the boy asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, Ethan. We are going to find her." Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then I will bring the bear." Daniel looked at him, his eyes soft. "Good idea, buddy. I think she would like that." As they stepped out of the penthouse, Daniel took one last look at the skyline, the empire he had built, the life he had controlled, and the love he had lost. He whispered to himself, "No more silence. It is time to make things right." And with that, Daniel Steele, the man who once believed love was a transaction, began the journey to win back the only woman who had ever made his world feel human again. Daniel Steele's private jet landed in a small coastal town 2 hours south of the city. The air smelled of salt and rain, and the sound of waves replaced the endless noise of business calls and boardroom deals. He had followed every clue from Emily's letter, every whisper from the orphanage volunteers, and it led him here to a quiet community center near the ocean, a place Emily had been helping rebuild. Ethan held his stuffed bear tightly as they stepped out of the car. "Do you think she will be happy to see us?" he asked. Daniel smiled faintly, though his voice carried the weight of uncertainty. "I think she will be surprised." Inside the community center, volunteers were painting walls and sorting donations. A young woman recognized Daniel instantly. "You must be Mr. Steele. Emily talked about you." She handed him a small envelope, already worn around the edges. "She left this here in case you ever came." Daniel's hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was short but powerful. "If you are reading this, It means you found me. I am not running anymore, Daniel. I am building something new, something good. But I do not know if I deserve to go back. The truth set me free, but it also broke me. If you want to understand why I did what I did, come to the lighthouse at sunset. He looked toward the horizon through the wide glass window. The old lighthouse stood in the distance, tall and silent against the sky. Daniel took Ethan's hand. Let's go see her. The climb to the lighthouse was steep, but the ocean wind was calm. The setting sun painted the sky with gold and rose, and the sound of the waves hitting the rocks below echoed like a heartbeat. As they reached the top, Daniel saw her. Emily Grace stood near the railing, her hair blowing in the wind, wearing a simple white dress. When she turned and saw them, her eyes widened in disbelief. Daniel, Ethan, the boy ran first. I told Uncle Daniel we would find you, Ethan cried, wrapping his arms around her. Emily knelt down, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. You did, sweetheart, you really did. When she finally stood, her eyes met Daniel's. You should not have come, she said softly. Daniel stepped closer. You left a letter, Emily. You wanted me to find you. She hesitated, then nodded. I wanted you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I came into your life with secrets, but I stayed because I found something I was not looking for. Daniel's tone was quiet but firm. Love? Emily's voice trembled. Yes, but by the time I realized it, it was already too late. Daniel took another step forward. Then let us stop pretending it is too late. I read your letter, Emily. I saw the truth in your words, and I cannot live another day without you knowing this. I forgive you. Tears welled in her eyes. Why? After everything I did? He looked at her with a kind of calm she had never seen in him before. Because you taught me something I never understood. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the only way to heal. She shook her head, trying to steady her voice. You are not the same man I left. No, he said softly. I am not. You changed me. For a long moment, there was only silence, the ocean wind, the sound of Ethan's laughter below as he played near the stairs, and the soft rhythm of two hearts that had finally stopped fighting. Emily reached into her bag and handed him another envelope. I was saving this for the day I could face you again. Inside was a small photograph, the three of them together at the hotel's charity event, all smiling. On the back, in her handwriting, it said, the family I never thought I would have. Veh. Daniel looked up at her, his eyes glassy. This is what I want, Emily. Not the empire, not the headlines, just this. She placed her hand on his. And what if the world does not believe in second chances? He smiled faintly. Then we will show them one. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel pulled her into his arms. For the first time in years, there were no cameras, no contracts, no lies, just the sound of waves and the quiet truth between them. When they finally walked back toward the car, Ethan looked up at them and said, Does this mean we are a family again? Daniel glanced at Emily and nodded. Yes, buddy, we are. And in that simple exchange, under the fading light of the lighthouse, the man who once believed love was just business finally understood what real fortune truly meant, finding his way back home. The following morning, the sea breeze carried a different kind of silence. It was not the emptiness Daniel Steele had known for months, but a quiet that felt alive, like the world had paused to breathe again. The lighthouse stood behind them as they drove away, sunlight reflecting through the windshield, casting soft light on Emily's face. She sat beside Daniel, her hand resting over Ethan's in the back seat. No one spoke. They did not need to. For the first time, the family looked complete. When they arrived back in the city, the hotel lobby erupted in whispers. Guests, employees, and even reporters recognized the woman walking beside Daniel. The tabloids had painted her as a liar, but the truth had returned with her, and this time Daniel refused to hide. He walked straight through the flashing lights, his hand in hers as Ethan clung to her dress. Inside the boardroom later that afternoon, the investors sat in uneasy silence. They had all read the same news headlines, waiting for Daniel's explanation. He stood at the head of the table, calm and composed. Yes, he began, my wife kept her family name from me, but she also saved this company when I could not. She turned a failing resort into a symbol of hope. And while the rest of us fought for power, she was out there building something that actually mattered. He placed a file on the table, the proposal Emily had written for the charity foundation. We are launching the Grace and Steele Foundation, he said. Half of our profits from the upcoming quarter will fund homes for orphans and children in need. An older investor frowned. You cannot merge with a competitor's family, Daniel. It will destroy our reputation. Daniel met his eyes steadily. It will rebuild it, because for the first time, we are choosing people over profit. The room went silent. For years, they had followed his every order out of fear. Now, they followed out of respect. After the meeting, Emily stood outside his office, watching through the glass wall as reporters swarmed the lobby below. You did not have to defend me, she said quietly when he approached. Yes, I did, Daniel replied, because I was wrong to let you fight alone. That night, the three of them had dinner together for the first time since she left. The penthouse felt warmer, softer, and alive again. Ethan told stories about school, about the bear he brought to find her, and about how he dreamed of them all living together forever. When he finished eating, Ethan climbed onto Daniel's lap. Uncle Daniel, he said, if you marry her again, can I be in the wedding this time? Daniel smiled, his eyes meeting Emily's across the table. I think that can be arranged. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Emily stepped out to the balcony. The city lights shimmered like stars below. Daniel joined her, setting 2 cups of tea on the railing. I used to think redemption meant fixing the damage, he said softly, but now I know it means forgiving yourself enough to start over. Emily turned toward him. You have already started, Daniel. He looked at her with a gentleness that came from truth, not pride. So have you. As they stood there, the sound of Ethan's laughter echoed faintly from the other room. It was the sound of peace returning to a home that had once been filled with pain. A few days later, Daniel and Emily attended a press conference announcing the foundation. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and for a brief moment, Emily hesitated. But Daniel reached for her hand. Do not hide anymore, he whispered. She smiled, taking the microphone. When we built this foundation, we were not trying to fix an image, she said. We were trying to rebuild faith. Faith in love, in kindness, in the idea that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a beginning. The room fell silent. Then, as if on cue, applause filled the space. That night, when they returned home, Ethan ran to the door holding a small envelope. This came in the mail, he said. Inside was a simple card from one of the orphans the foundation had already helped. It read, Thank you for believing that broken things can be beautiful again. Oh, Emily looked up at Daniel, her eyes glistening. That is exactly what we needed to hear. Daniel nodded. That is exactly what you taught me. He reached out and drew her into his arms. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, giggling. Now no one can run away anymore, he said. Daniel laughed softly, holding them tighter. No, buddy, not anymore. Audie too. For a man who once measured his worth in money and success, Daniel Steele had finally learned that the greatest fortune of all was not what he owned, but what he was willing to forgive. And as the lights of the city shimmered beyond their window, it felt as if even the world outside was exhaling a quiet sigh of relief that love, after all its battles, had found its way home. Weeks passed, and the city began to see something extraordinary unfold. The press that once chased scandals now followed stories of hope. The Grace and Steele Foundation grew faster than anyone expected, bringing 2 rival hotel empires together under one purpose, helping children who had no home. The world called it a miracle. Daniel Steele called it Emily's doing. Every morning she arrived at the hotel early, not as an heiress or a social figure, but as a woman determined to make a difference. She worked side by side with the staff, organized events, and turned the ballroom that had once hosted corporate galas into a shelter for charity dinners. Her humility inspired everyone. At one of those events, the lights dimmed and the media turned their cameras toward her. For years, they had called her the hidden heiress. But that night, she stood before them, no longer hiding, no longer running. I once believed success meant standing alone, she said into the microphone. But real success is when even your enemies want to build something good with you. This foundation began with pain and loss. It became possible because one man believed in forgiveness more than pride. She turned toward Daniel in the audience. He was not wearing the face of a businessman that night. He was just a man looking at the woman who had changed his life. Their eyes met across the crowd, and something silent passed between them, stronger than any applause could ever capture. After the event, investors from both corporations approached Daniel. One of them said, "You managed to do what no contract ever could unite 2 families that hated each other." Daniel smiled and replied, "It was not me, it was her." The partnership between the two hotel groups became the talk of every financial paper in the country. Headlines read, "The Hidden Heiress and the Millionaire Who Chose Compassion Over Power." For once, it was a story about love and redemption, not betrayal and greed. Ethan watched his uncle and Emily work together with pride. He loved visiting the new community centers that carried their names. One afternoon, he tugged on Emily's sleeve and said, "You saved a lot of kids, like me." She smiled and knelt beside him. "We saved them, Ethan. All of us." Meanwhile, Daniel had changed too. He no longer spent his nights buried in paperwork. He visited construction sites, met families helped by the foundation, and spent time with Ethan at the park every weekend. He had built his fortune from walls of ambition, but now he was learning to build bridges instead. One afternoon, a news reporter asked Daniel what inspired the sudden change in his life. He thought for a moment, then answered simply, "A woman who showed me that love can do what money cannot." I'm advised. In the weeks that followed, Emily received hundreds of letters from people she had never met, parents, volunteers, even competitors. One letter read, "You reminded us that even in business, hearts can still lead." She kept that one folded in her planner, tucked between meeting notes and sketches for the next project. The biggest surprise came a month later. A journalist who had once written cruel stories about her asked for an exclusive interview. Emily hesitated, but Daniel encouraged her. "Tell them your story," he said. "Not to clear your name, but to help others find the courage to begin again." During the interview, she spoke honestly about everything, the deception, the shame, and the painful lessons she had learned. "Forgiveness does not erase the past," she said. "It redeems it. I am living proof that even the worst mistake can lead to the right miracle." The clip went viral overnight. Viewers across the country shared it, calling it the most honest love story on television. That weekend, the foundation hosted a celebration at the hotel. Children ran across the courtyard holding balloons, their laughter echoing through the marble halls. Daniel stood beside Emily, watching the sunset reflect off the tall glass windows. Ethan ran up and held both their hands. "Are we going to keep helping people forever?" he asked. Danielle smiled. "As long as there are people who need us, yes." Emily looked up at him, her eyes glistening in the golden light. "You really have changed, Daniel Steele." He laughed softly. "You did not just change my company, Emily. You changed me." The music from the courtyard faded into the sound of ocean waves beyond the city. For a man who once measured life in profit and losses, Daniel had found something that could not be calculated: purpose. That night, before leaving the event, Emily stood by the entrance as guests departed. One elderly woman stopped to thank her. "You remind me of my late daughter," she said. "The kind of woman who heals the world just by forgiving it." Emily's voice trembled as she replied, "Thank you, ma'am. I am still learning how." When the doors closed and the lights dimmed, Daniel reached for her hand. "You have done enough for one lifetime," he whispered. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not yet," she said. "There are still stories that need a happy ending." And for the first time since their contract began, Daniel realized the story they were living was already one of them. A full year had passed since that first contract that changed everything. The world had stopped calling their story a scandal. Now it was known simply as the miracle of Grace and Still. The foundation had expanded across the country, transforming abandoned hotels into homes for children. Every month, Daniel Steele and Emily Grace traveled to new cities together, opening doors not just for others, but for themselves. What began as a lie had become a legacy of love and healing. On a warm spring morning, Daniel stood by the rooftop pool of the Steele Grand Hotel, the same place where Ethan had once slipped and fallen. The sunlight danced on the water, golden and alive. Ethan was older now, his laughter echoing across the deck as he chased a paper boat floating near the edge. Emily approached, her soft white dress catching the breeze. She carried a small basket filled with flowers, ready for the hotel's new dedication ceremony. Daniel turned toward her, smiling. "Do you ever think about that day?" She nodded. "Every time I hear him laugh, that is the sound that started everything." He looked out across the water. "I used to think fate was cruel. Now I think it was just waiting for me to stop running." The ceremony began quietly. Guests gathered, many of them children from the foundation, some investors, and familiar faces who had once doubted them. There were no reporters this time, no flashing cameras, only the sound of wind and the scent of fresh flowers. Daniel stepped up to speak. His voice was steady, filled with calm strength. "A long time ago, this place was just a symbol of business and pride. Today, It is a symbol of forgiveness, the kind that heals not only hearts, but generations. Everything you see here exists because one woman believed that love could rebuild what ambition destroyed. He turned to Emily, his eyes warm. I do not think I ever said this the right way before, but thank you for saving more than just my company. You saved me. A hush fell over the crowd. Emily's eyes shimmered, and she walked up beside him. And you saved me too, she said softly. You gave me the chance to be more than my past. And as applause spread through the courtyard, Ethan ran forward, holding a bouquet of white roses. Mom, Uncle Daniel, these are for you, he said proudly. Emily knelt down, tears in her eyes. You mean for us, sweetheart? Daniel lifted the boy into his arms, smiling. For us? He repeated. The three of them stood together at the edge of the pool, the same spot where fear had once turned to fate. The water reflected the morning sun, casting ripples of gold across their faces. Emily whispered, It feels like everything came full circle. Daniel nodded. It did. The only difference is that now, if one of us falls, she smiled and finished the sentence, the other two will catch them. Laughter broke through the crowd, light and genuine. A soft wind carried petals across the water, and for a moment the whole scene looked like a painting, love, forgiveness, and new beginnings captured in sunlight. As the ceremony ended, Daniel, Emily, and Ethan walked together toward the garden. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer scared them. Daniel looked at Emily one last time before stepping into the sunlight. You once said our marriage was a contract, he said quietly. Maybe it was, but this is the promise. Emily took his hand, their fingers interlacing. A promise that lasts, she replied. And as the camera of life panned wide across the golden skyline, the story of the millionaire and the hidden heiress closed not with goodbye, but with a beginning. A beginning written not in ink, but in forgiveness, love, and the laughter of a child who reminded them both what home truly means.